He is the host of the Blazers Edge podcast and the co-host of NBC's Northwest Blazers Outsiders post-game show. We now welcome Dan Marang onto Hoopsology. How's it going, Dan?
Not too bad, guys. How y'all doing?
Really, really good. Looking forward to this chat and wanted just to pick your brain regarding the Portland Trailblazers. Right now, they're looking pretty good in the Western Conference. They just got off with a huge victory over the Dallas Mavericks last night, as of this recording, March 20th, 2021. And I wanted to discuss just the Trailblazers after the All-Star break. They look really good. Have the number one offense in the NBA. You retweeted this tweet from Jason Quick of The Athletic. They're looking really good. What do you make of this team so far after the All-Star break? And how good do you see them performing in terms of the West once we get into the end of the season?
So whatever you think of the Trailblazers, they're always going to do better than whatever it is you think. That's kind of been their ethos under Damian Lillard, under Terry Stotts, CJ McCollum. Like the last 6 years has kind of been the only time they have ever fallen short of expectations was when they got housed by the Pelicans in the playoffs. That's it. Other than that, they have exceeded expectations every year. But they're still not great. Even though you look at them right now and there was, when Yusef Nurkic gets back, they'll really get in gear. Well, they still feature a 6'1" guard, a 6'3" guard, and a couple of forwards that, while they're better than they were when they had Alfred Camino and Mo Harkless in those spots, now with Derek Jones Jr. and Robert Covington, they're still not versatile. They're siloed players. So you're very reliant on the elite level isolation and pick and roll play. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It just limits how effective you can be with certain things of undersized guards, which, while they've been successful in the regular season, have yet to, let's go back historically. Outside of Isaiah Thomas and Joe Dumars, a small backcourt has never won. It's never happened outside of those two guys, and they're both Hall of Famers. So I say all of that to kind of frame where the Blazers are right now. They are who they are. They're a good team. They can beat anybody on any given night, and they can lose to anybody on any given night. They are a very particular team that is incredibly good offensively, can play well defensively, and can present some unique opportunities to go against other teams. But they only have so many lanes they can choose from. And if you start taking those lanes away from them, they start to look less than stellar.
So, Dan, that seems to be kind of the storyline with the Trailblazers. Correct me if I'm wrong, like the last few years. So what is it going to take for this team? I mean, it seems like we're kind of at a turning point in terms of are they just going to stay kind of at this same thing every single year? It's kind of the same story. Or, I mean, it seemed like you've heard this kind of same old story before. So, I mean, what is it going to take? I mean, ultimately, is it, I guess, out of stuff, I'll say it. I mean, can they win with CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard? They can't, so they have to make a move, you think?
And it's not, I always have to preface this with anybody I'm explaining this to for the first time. It's not that I don't like CJ or that I don't think he's a good player. Sure. I think he's a point guard miscast as a two. That's realistically what when you look at his numbers when Damian Lillard has been out, in those games, CJ is averaging 30 points, 8 assists, 8 rebounds. He's putting up Lillard-esque numbers in those situations. While I don't think he's quite to that level, if he was running a team, take really any team in the NBA who doesn't have an elite level point guard. If you put CJ McCollum, if you put CJ McCollum in Boston right now, had they made a swap then for whatever draft pick haul and they didn't have Kemba, I think CJ would be a better fit because of his ability to work in the pick and roll, because of his isolation ability, because of his ability to work in the mid-range. When CJ's healthy and he's rolling, he's one of the 3 best mid-range shooters in the NBA. It's him, it's Kevin Durant, it's Kyrie Irving. It's those 3. And they're so far above everybody else in that respect. It presents a unique dynamic. But the word that I've come up with to describe the Portland Trailblazers as it pertains to this group, not necessarily this group, to Dame and CJ, you're siloed in that you have to have certain things to build alongside them. If you just had Dame and you had a CJ-esque player at literally any other position, you can work with some things. But because they make up the backcourt, because they're less than elite level NBA athletes with elite size or hyper twitch, ability defensively or switch ability, it limits what you can do to build alongside them. So you look at it, and again, they have a very high floor. There's no doubt about that. Nobody wants to play that team. Like when you look at it, you're like, oh, God, I got to defend these two guys for 48 minutes. That's what they look at every night because they will make you work. And here's the thing. Damian Lillard has elevated to a point of what we're seeing right now as quite literally the best clutch player the NBA has ever measured. I don't know if you guys have seen it. I think the Jump had it the other day. It's a chart basically showing true shooting attempts and then true shooting percentage. And there's like a star out in the nether regions of this chart that is Damian Lillard, the North Star. And then you've got like, Jokic and Giannis and these other in Harden and these guys that have like 58 to 70% true shooting percentage on high volume. And you're like, how is Dame all the way up there? So he's been able to, at least this year, take and win games 5 or 6 that they shouldn't have won. That's how good he has been in those situations where it flips some of the perception. But you run this team into the playoffs, they still run into the same issues. They can't switch. They're too reliant on a couple of guards, and they can't really get things done defensively with their offensive units. So they're still kind of juggling this. So the long way to get back to your point, yes, they need to make a change. They have needed to trade. They have needed to trade CJ McCollum since he broke out in 2015 in the playoffs.
Dan, with the history of this team, I mean, this season included, last season included, do you think we have a fair sense as fans of the full potential of this Trailblazers team? How much do you think that weighs into like how we assess how competitive this team can be?
So I know everything I said. I don't think we've seen the full potential of this team, but I don't think that has anything to do with Dame and CJ. I think they are who they are. The biggest difference is we have not seen Yusef Nurkic really in a playoff series healthy. You saw him in the bubble last year against the Lakers. He was gassed. He had not played basketball basically leading up into the bubble in almost 2 years. I mean, that's the situation that he was coming off of. So I think that's probably the lone question. And as we're sitting here recording this now, he was supposed to be back right now, according to the original diagnosis, but he's delayed off of a calf injury, and he's probably not going to be back until the end of March. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they want to make sure they said he's got a calf injury, but he's also a clutch client. They want to make sure his guy looks good because he's going to come out there and he's going to have some eyes on him. They're going to be making one of those stretch runs again. Dame's going to be at the forefront of the MVP story. And if Nurk comes out, and I'll be honest, he looked awful to start the season. He was out, and there's a reason for it. And I think this is one of the acceptable reasons when you're talking about this. Nurk lost his grandmother to COVID going into the bubble, or she got sick going into the bubble, and he opted to stay in the bubble instead of going back to Bosnia. That haunted him, and it still haunts him. And so he stayed in Bosnia when the training camp was starting up to deal with some other family issues, and he wasn't in shape. He wasn't ready to go, and normally, I would definitely look at that and be like, come on, man, this is your job, this is your livelihood. You got to kind of figure it out. In his case, I was like, I get it. I get it. And he admitted it. He's like, hey, listen, I'm not where I am. I'm not where I need to be. It is what it is. I'm trying to get there. And then, he breaks the hand and, we're kind of back to the situation. So I think they're trying to make sure he's fully healthy and fully ready to go as he gets back out there. And it's not a conditioning issue when he gets back out on the floor and everybody's got eyes on him.
Do you get the sense that inside the franchise, we're leading up to the trade deadline, of course. Do you get the sense that the franchise is leaning more towards like, let's run this back, or it's time to make a move, time to break this up a little bit, maybe get out of that silo that you're talking about? I mean, obviously Dame Lillard is untouchable, but
Dame's the only untouchable.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And so if you're looking at how things are structured, CJ's as close to it as he gets it. It's because Olshey kind of treats him as one of his draft picks. Here's the thing. The guy that everybody talks about with Portland is Gary Trent Jr. There's a couple things to know about Gary. Number one, he's a second-round pick. He was a guaranteed second-round pick because they used part of their MLE to pay him. That's how much they invested in him early on. But here's how Olshey operates. He uses those early second-round picks as trade chips. He tries to grow them, build them up, develop them. Think Alan Crabb. Think Pat Connaughton. Jake Layman was supposed to be another one of those guys. They take a fly, and they actually do a pretty damn good job in that regard of finding guys that are NBA caliber players in the second round. Not many teams have done much better with those picks. I'd say probably the Nuggets with Monte Morris and that Jokic guy did pretty good in that regard. But that's kind of been the Blazers' MO. The problem is they haven't had a guy hit quite early enough to turn it into a trade, to get something out of them other than what they gave that franchise. But because Gary has been so good that he's stepped in for CJ McCollum and shown that he's starter capable. I mean, he's one of probably the 10 best three-point shooters in the NBA right now. That's not the Blazers homer and me. You can look at the numbers. He's a 40+% guy on volume as a starter on scouting reports. Like he's that dude. He's a plus defender. He's not a great defender, but what team in the NBA doesn't want a 6'4", strong, heady, smart, three-point shooting defensive two-guard? Like him and Robert Covington are two guys you can throw on any team in the NBA and be like, yeah, no, they fit. And so problem is they're going to have, $80-ish million tied up in Dame and CJ going into next year. They can't afford to throw 18 to 20 million, which is what I've been told Gary Trent Jr. is going to command on the open market. So they've got a couple options. They've got to either trade him now at the trade deadline. They've either got to work a sign and trade in free agency, or they're going to have to sign him and retain him and then look to flip him 6 months later 90 days later when he's tradable again. But you have to be careful with some of the poison pill provisions that kind of come with those situations. Then that value comes back down. And the Blazers, they're not going to be stuck in the same situation that we were with Alan Crabb and having to take on negative assets that are, let me check the clock. Yes, still on the Blazers payroll 5 years later. But they can find a way. And I actually, before I hopped on with you guys, I had made a few phone calls. I know they are sniffing around some guys. I don't know if it'll be enough to get things done. The offer that I heard was more than I thought would be on the table. I'll leave it at that. So they're always trying to make a move, but they also will. The only time I've ever heard CJ McCollum's name be actually in a trade offer and be put on the table was a few months ago with James Harden. That is the only time I have heard that he could be made available for the right trade. But James Harden was the one and only time I have heard that his name was in the mix. Not for Paul George, not for anybody else. It was just Harden. So that's the kind of level you're talking about with how the Blazers view McCollum in that regard. But I think they're going to be a strong competitor for LaMarcus Aldridge when he gets bought out. I'm nearly certain he's going to be bought out at this point. LaMarcus has made no secret that he wants to come back here. The organization has said as much that they would like to have him back as much as they can without, shooting a flare into the sky. Dame has said so publicly. And let's be honest, the Blazers can't trust any of their big men outside of Enes Kanter right now. I mean, Zach Collins is going to be, after the season, not have played basketball essentially for 2 years. Nurk has played 12 games, 20, 25 games in the past 3 years. So getting a 7-footer who immediately knows the system, even if he's lost a step defensively, has all the faith and trust of Terry Stotts, can come in, knock down a shot, and you can run an offense through. I could very easily see them going out there and being. I think it's going to be between Miami and Portland for LaMarcus when it's all said and done.
Dan, I want to talk to you about Damian Lillard, just his evolution as a player. And you retweeted an article from Jason Quick, and I didn't realize this reading it. What a horrible 18 months for Damian Lillard in terms of his personal life. It is unbelievable. Can you just take us in terms of just his mindset? Because I believe the national media is just not really playing this up in terms of how well he's performing under these circumstances. It's quite incredible.
So we all hear the tropes about athletes and how dedicated they are and how hardworking they are. And for the most part, I think you can say that about most people in any walk of life. Damian Lillard is genuinely different. I don't say that as a guy that covers him. I say that as a guy who's lived and seen this stuff. He truly is different. He came from a place in Oakland in Brookfield that is, it's not good. He saw somebody get killed in front of him at 12 years old. He has lost numerous friends to senseless violence. He just, was it back in October? Was it August? It all blurs together during COVID. The article you alluded to, his cousin, Chef B. He was his private chef, both for him and CJ. Little peek behind the curtain. The day he passed, he was supposed to be on my podcast. I was texting him and wasn't hearing back from him. And it wasn't until later that day I found out what had happened. And Dame walks in and finds the dead body of his cousin, just in the middle of COVID, while his wife is pregnant with twins. Well, he's already got a kid on the way. After the bubble, like it's just one thing after another. Then another friend is months later is shot dead. Two, in fact, one cousin and one really close friend. So he he has been through a ton, and you could see it. And then the most recent events were a couple weeks ago, and it was on the tail end of a road trip. And you could, for those of us that knew kind of what was going on, it was more than like, yeah, Dame doesn't have it tonight. Like emotionally, you could just see he was just gone. And yet he still went out there. And for Damian Lillard standards, it was subpar, but still, put up all NBA type performances. And I had a few people text me, like, hey, is Dame okay? Is he hurt? And I'm like, nah, he's going through some stuff. You'll probably see something about it here in a little while. And then Jason wrote the article and Dame shared it on IG. This dude he's I hate saying this, but he's different. He really is different. And he doesn't just talk the talk. He walks it every part of it. Everything he does is measured. And I don't mean that in a way of like marketing. He thinks about things and he does things with purpose. And from the way he goes about his game to in the off season, like, okay, I got to work on how I handle traps. I've got to be able to extend my range out. I've got to be able to finish inside through contact. I've got to be better at getting to the free throw line. I've got to be better about finding kickouts to, a step or two further into the paint. Also, I've got to find a way to give back to my community. I've got to find a way to grow my brand. I know that music is something that allows me to express myself and allow me to be free and be who I am. I got to find time for that. Like he prioritizes and he plans. He does everything with purpose. And it's truly incredible to watch because you think about all the different ways that he's being pulled in life. And then he goes out there and says, I want to finish my career in Portland. I want to, and this is how self-aware he is. So in Dame's rookie year, Sasha Pavlovich was on the team. Sasha's loved by all of his teammates, right? They were asking Dame about trade talks, and he says, I couldn't be a GM because if I was a GM, Sasha Pavlovich would still be my teammate because he rides for his guys. Not every single player that has ever come through Portland and Damian Lillard, period, has had effusive praise for Damian Lillard. But those guys, you can kind of tell they are a little bit different to begin with, but they will all say the same thing about Dame. He looks out for guys. He treats everybody like friends, like family. He wants to see. If you would take people talk about the summer of 2016 when the Blazers made some salary decisions that were pretty crippling, but he wanted to see Mo Harkless get paid. He wanted to see Alan Crabb get paid. He wanted to see Myers Leonard get paid. He wants to see all of his teammates get paid. And he doesn't want to build a super team in the sense of knocking somebody else out to bring them in. He wants to build with his guys. To him, it would be that much more special. I think he's crazy because I don't think it'll ever happen. But it's not fake. Like it took me a couple years to figure out that he would add something new to his game, that I need to stop questioning what his limits were. And then it took me a little bit longer to realize that he's different. He really is. He goes about things in a different manner, and he attacks them with such ferocity, with such purpose that you start looking around the league. And I'm sure you guys have had a discussion like this before. There are so many players in the NBA. We got 450-ish active players. There's a good chunk of those dudes that basketball isn't their number one thing in life. That's just that goes through all walks of life. It took me a little while to kind of figure that out when I first started really getting into this. There were some guys that they just want to get paid and show up and cash their checks and hoop. Like Dame lives this stuff. And so you start seeing that different show. The Damian Lillards, the Giannis's, the Jimmy Butlers, the guys that just show through. And so you look at what Dame's been through in his last 18 months. And then you look at the performances right now. The numbers he's putting up right now are better than any numbers any Trailblazer ever. Not Bill Walton, not Clyde Drexler, nobody. Not Brandon Roy. He is one of one. And so part of me wants things to come together for him in the way that he wants it. Most of me, though, is like, trade CJ, trade this person, trade this, but put dudes around him and give him the the number one face of this franchise. Give him a real shot, because if it's all said and done and he doesn't get a real shot, I'm talking like just give him a Charles Barkley and Phoenix shot. Like give him the dark horse chance. Let him go on that big stage, even if he gets swept there. But at least get him there, give him that chance. And if they can do that for him, I think everything will kind of come together. But that's a long roundabout way of getting to kind of what he's been through and what he is and what he means to this franchise now.
And saying that, Dan, I guess my question is, what is this going to be his legacy? He seems fiercely loyal to Portland. Yeah, we know how the game is played with different players. I mean, Charles Barkley, and when he has a phenomenal career, what's the first thing that's brought up? Never won a title. And as great as Damian Lillard is, once we talk about him in the Hall of Fame one day, that's going to be the strike against him if he remains in Portland, doesn't get the job done. So you say he's just a student of the game. He's so passionate. I guess in terms of his desire to win the title and his loyalty to Portland, I get the sense that his loyalty to Portland matters more to him and ultimately winning the championship. Is that right? Or do you think that might change as the years go by?
I think right now and throughout his career, that has been the case. He does want to win a title. And here's the thing. He genuinely believes that every year he can win a title. It's not like he's crazy and he's just psyching himself up. He's nuts. He absolutely fundamentally believes every year he has the roster to go win a title. Like that's how the dude's wired. He's literally he's a bit of a strange cat in that regard. Like he's like, but you have to think about that. He's a 2-star guard, 6'1", 180 pounds out of Oakland, going to Weber State. Like you gotta be a little bit different people forget that when he got drafted, it's like, yeah, he was a top 7 pick, guys. Like he was there because he led the nation in scoring at Weber State. Like he came in year 1, beat Anthony Davis out for Rookie of the Year. Granted, the AD was injured a little bit, but in his first 5 years, Chris Paul was the only other point guard who was more efficient in the pick and roll. Like how many point guards do we see come in the NBA that are like Luka's the only one? Luka's the only guy we've seen since Damian Lillard come into the league and be like, yeah, no, I can run an NBA pick and roll and not just run it well, run it elite. That's the kind of player that he turned into out of a 2-star guy coming out of Oakland. Like he is just a different cat in that regard. And so ultimately, I've said it'll go one of two ways. He'll spend his entire career in Portland, full on Dirk Nowitzki. And it'll be good enough for him, and it'll be good enough for Portland. There will be people like me who will love and appreciate, but always wonder, well, just that one chance. Like I'll go to my grave believing a healthy Brandon Roy, LaMarcus Aldridge, Greg Oden team would have been a title contending team. Like those guys played a total of 66 games together. They were 50-12 in those games. And that was a period of when they were all kids. Like if those guys all stay healthy, they all stay together. I don't care about modern NBA. Good luck with Draymond Green trying to handle Greg Oden on the block. Like go with God. But with Dame, LaMarcus Aldridge is the only all-star he's ever played with. That's it. That's the only guy. And if you want to say, Carmelo now, and it's like, man, come on, let's pump the brakes. So he either finishes his entire career in Portland and plays 18, 20 years here, or he goes Dwayne Wade, spends 99% of his career here, has a 1-year tour in the Bay. I can see him playing a year for the Warriors to go play in front of family, go and play in front of friends. And everybody here in Portland will have said, hey, you earned it. You gave your heart and soul to this franchise. They kind of did the same with Drexler, but he was still pretty damn good at that point in time. It wasn't a Dwayne Wade scenario where, it was, end of his career, go home for a year kind of situation, come back and retire with us. Drexler went and won a ring in Houston, was still pretty decent. So I think those are probably your two options. I don't think he's ever going to go to LA. I don't think he's ever going to go to New York or any of those other markets. I think barring a monumental collapse or a seriously strained relationship, Dame spends his entire career here. He has stood on that mountain far too long of wanting to emulate Dirk to kind of be that one singular franchise guy that I don't see him going against that.
And great summary of Dame Lillard there, Dan. I really, really appreciate that. I guess I'd quickly ask the flip side of that with Portland's relationship with Dame Lillard. I mean, you've talked a little bit about that. I mean, is there, for me as someone who's not a Blazers fan, because of many of the things you described there, his work ethic, his professionalism, the way he carries himself, I mean, it's impossible for me not to root for the guy.
Yeah.
How is that relationship in Portland? I mean, is this the closest they've ever been with the player? And is there any other relationship in the NBA that's closer than this with Dame Lillard and Portland?
So talking to other beat writers and other writers and media folks that cover teams, Dame is a two-time award winner. I think it's the Magic Johnson Award for relationship with the media. Dame has done post-game interviews every single game but one in his entire career. But one. Like, let that sink in for a second. You hear players complain about doing this, that. That man has answered the bell every single night of his NBA career but once. That's insane to think about. So I've talked to a lot of folks about him, and everybody says that he is the best guy in the league to cover. Melo is a guy who has been revered and has always been great with the media. And I talked to New York folks last year, and they said the same thing about Dame. They're like, he's perfect. Like, he's everything you want him to be. He has ingrained himself here in this community. He is easily the most popular star this franchise has ever had, locally for sure. He gives back a ton. The PIL, the Portland Interscholastic League, inner city high schools, football, baseball, basketball. Dame does a ton for them, giving money, tutoring. Has a organization that highlights young up and coming leaders, and outside of COVID, he would give them tickets to games, scholarships. Obviously, he's the one thing about living in Portland is we are the home of Nike and Adidas. So they're one side of town is Nike, and on the west side and the north side is Adidas. And obviously, Dame is the face of Adidas basketball. Dame will show up in a truck full of Adidas shoes and just hand them out. Dame will show up at wherever at Shriners and go see kids. I mean, he doesn't do this for the pub. He just does it, and he's beloved. He can go anywhere in this town, any way, any shape, matter, or form, and the red carpet's rolled out for him because he is this town. As much as I'm trying to think of, LeBron probably is about as close as you get with Akron and Cleveland his first time through. Even though Dame's not a Portland guy, that's probably the closest thing I could say before things obviously soured. And I think if you're looking for somebody else active in their city right now, it's probably Giannis. Giannis in Milwaukee. He was kind of raised there. He got there as a kid. And now he's, he found a relationship there, and his brothers have come and played with him there. The organization has grown and built around him. I think that's that same kind of situation where they've kind of grown up together. So I think that's probably, if you're going to draw that parallel line, though, those are probably the two guys. But yeah, no, Dame is right now the most favorite son of Portland.
Shifting gears, Dan, I want to ask you personally, we've asked a lot of our other guests this, what has it been covering the league during the pandemic? I get this, a lot of the journalists we've talked to seem just frustrated that the content's the same because everybody gets the same access. But some echo that there are maybe some things that as the conditions of covering the team have changed, they might want to stick around once things go back to normal. Is there anything positive that has come out of in terms of media coverage that you found during the pandemic that you wish would stay around once things go back to normal eventually?
So you don't have the same level of access. That much is true. The one thing I would say is that because of that, in some cases, I find it easier to get a hold of guys off the record. There's not as big a commitment. They aren't required. Obviously, we can't go into practices. We can't catch everybody pregame and postgame. So I'm on my phone a lot more than I was in the past. I found that agents are a lot easier to work with because they're also looking to get a particular narrative out in that regard. So I think that there's probably an easier medium in that regard. But I will say that that's been at least somewhat of a positive. That and getting people familiar with Zoom technology, remote conferencing, I think is a good thing in general because it makes things a little bit easier to necessitate meetings and those things. Beyond that, though, I am a little bit worried about things staying quite like this because then teams can limit access and control narratives a little bit more than they already do. And I'm not like terrified of it, but I'm worried about it to an extent of like, I don't think this is a good thing because having that context for stuff matters. Like I could get a bite from, an agent or an exec from I think it's another deal might be coming up. Well, that may just be smoke because they're trying to get something out there for a client to generate some interest. I can't go in and go talk to somebody and go, hey, what about this, this, and this? Or, something could come out there that, I don't know what the validity of it is because I don't have that background to go off of. Or the easy line to draw is a coach says, well, that wasn't part of the game plan. Well, if I can go talk to player X or player Y about, hey, man, what was the game plan? Did you like what was going on there? Well, then I can be either more critical of the coach or less critical because, that wasn't part of the game plan. So, and this guy freelanced something there that wasn't supposed to happen. Like that kind of stuff, not being able to bounce that back and forth, I think is detrimental to the overall coverage. So I want to find that happy medium. But overall, I think there's some things we can take from this in the long run that can be good. But I can't wait until, we can get back into locker rooms and talk to guys again.
For sure. Well, Dan, thank you very much for joining the show. Really appreciate it. Please let our listeners and viewers know where they can find you on social media and what projects you're working on for the rest of this year.
Awesome. Yeah, you can find me on social media at Danny Marang, at DANNYMARANG, Twitter, IG, YouTube. Everything's up there. If you live in the Portland market, you can find me on NBC Sports Northwest following every Blazers game on Blazers Outsiders, the Blazers Edge podcast at blazersedge.com. If you're outside the Portland market and you have a VPN, please feel free, jack up the ratings. I'm all for it. Beyond that, on YouTube, again, at Danny Marang. The stuff I'm working on a lot lately, for those watching, if there's any video going to be posted out of this, I'm in a new house, which means I'm finally moved in and my video content will be starting back up again soon. So I'll have more and more posted on YouTube. It's going to be mostly Blazers specific, but I have some trade deadline breakdown stuff coming up here actually in a couple hours.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan, for taking time out of your busy schedule.
No problem, guys.
I really appreciate it. Thank you for the chat.
Hey, no problem. You guys take care.